Hello, everybody. This is Dan Owen on the Dan Owen channel, and I'm with my friend Daniel Mayfield from Abilene, Texas today. Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you minister.
Yes, sir. Currently in Abilene, Texas, the Oldham Lane Church of Christ. Been here, believe it or not, coming up on 3 years, which is crazy. It's
Wow.
gone by super fast. But it feels like we just got here yesterday. But my wife and I, we were missionaries for several years down in the Caribbean. Our firstborn was born down there. We were in Oklahoma for a while, and now we're in Abilene, and we love it out here.
Good deal. Why the interest in this topic that we're speaking about today?
Well, for me, the reason why is in these 12 years that I've been in ministry, I have seen so many Christians affected by the culture and not necessarily positively. I mean, I think there are neutral aspects of culture that we just can't escape, our
Mhm.
accents and those kinds of things. But I've just seen a lot of Christians that have been negatively impacted and maybe even bringing that into scripture where they read certain ideas into the Bible that they're familiar with in the culture and they may not be true. And a lot of times they're destructive. And so it's an important topic, I think, from that standpoint.
Okay. Well, you were going to ask some questions about it, so fire away and we'll discuss a little bit.
Yes. Okay. So first question that I had is from your vantage point, and I know you have many years of perspective, right? How long were you preaching?
Oh, 52, 53 years, something like that.
Okay. Had there been a little bit of changes in the
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Okay. So over those years, how have you seen culture impacting Christians, especially in a negative sense?
Well, I think today Christians don't realize it. Many Christians don't realize it, but postmodern thinking and a postmodern worldview has just infiltrated their pores, and without even really realizing what they're doing, they have adopted a worldview that isn't consistent with the Bible. And I find this come out a lot of times when you'll have a boomer like me or even a millennial like you, maybe, but your millennials are probably one of the most postmodern thinking groups we have. But a boomer will be talking to a child or a grandchild and they'll be talking about some issue. It could be some biblical issue. And they're just like, they're not making any headway at all. And the reason is that the assumptions of the two of them are totally different about everything, about God, about religion, about the Bible, about the nature of the world, about how
Hmm.
the world even got here. And so they may be discussing an issue, but it's not the issue that's keeping them apart. It's their fundamental assumptions that are keeping them
Hmm.
apart. And so they're not on the same plane at all. Um, I think that, people that they're in Abilene or here in Houston are not going to say, well, I've been studying postmodern philosophy, and so I'm a postmodernist. They don't
Right.
do that. What they do is it seeps into their pores through the movies they watch, the music they listen to, the newscasts they hear on the news, the podcasts and the internet stuff that they get,
Hmm.
Twitter and whatever else there, whatever it's called, Instagram and all those other things. It just kind of seeps in and to make this a little bit more plain, um, even though they read the biblical account of creation, the assumption is that evolution is really right, macroevolution, and the world got here in that form some ways, and they don't really give total credence to the biblical creation story. And when it
Hmm.
comes to the Bible's great, but the Bible's one story among a whole bunch of different world religion stories, and why should my story be superior to anybody else's story? And so
Right.
I tolerate their ideas and they tolerate my ideas, but who am I to say that my ideas are better than their
Hmm.
ideas? I don't know if you're familiar with it, Daniel, but there's a guy by the name of Brian McLaren that has written some books, and one of the most powerful attacks on Christianity I've read in a long time is a book that he wrote in 2022 called Do I Stay Christian? Do I Stay Christian by Brian McLaren.
Mhm.
And he says that he gives reasons why not to stay Christian. And some of these I've found pretty fascinating. He deals with all the Crusades and the Inquisitions and all the bad things Christians have done in the world. He says that Christians are anti-Semites, and he says that Christian religion is a very authoritarian religion. He says
Does he
that
know that our Lord is was a Semite?
yeah, but it's very authoritarian. He says white patriarchy has taken over Christianity, and that Christianity oppresses women and oppresses minorities. He says, see, he's looking at this coming at how he sees Christendom and how
Mhm.
he sees the behavior of people who wear that moniker in any way in the world. And the people that he's dealing with see all these things. And the assumption of the culture is that we're all evolving and we're all changing and we're all learning from each other. And there's an unending conversation going on between all of us. And
Mhm.
it's like we all learn from each other and we're all evolving to a higher state by just listening to each other and taking bits from each other. And it never arrives at a place where it's done and it's true. It's just evolving. And for us to think that we are in some solid ground or place that we can say this is right is
Mhm.
totally arrogant and totally not good for world harmony, and therefore we shouldn't think like that. So see, this is sort of the
Mhm.
philosophy that has evolved in our culture,
Yeah.
and people have just unwittingly bought into some of these assumptions.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times we in the conservative, more conservative parts of the churches of Christ are sitting here discussing issues as if we're really talking about the issue when we're
Mhm.
really not understanding that the assumptions of the two parties are completely different in
Right.
discussing the issue. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, oh, yeah. I mean, so what you're saying, there was a point where you could go out into the street and just have a conversation with somebody, and you would at least share foundationally similar perspectives on the nature of truth, that it is at least absolute.
Yeah.
And I think in some of Schaeffer's writings, he talked about how there used to be a time, even though people would argue about truth, they at least all agreed that there was a single truth, whatever that was. They'd fight about what it was, but they didn't think that truth was some nebulous, you
Right.
know, inconceivable thing. And so you could at least have a debate. But now the way that people view the world is different.
Yeah.
You,
Why should I think that the Buddhist truth is any different than the Muslim truth? It's
hmm
any different from the Hindu truth, is any different from the Jewish truth or the Christian truth or whoever, or the agnostic's truth or the atheist truth. And we're
right.
all just searching and seeking.
Well, when it can't be, when it isn't absolute, when you can't stand on it, why is he writing a book trying to convince you
Well,
one way or the other?
yeah, that's a good question. What he's trying to do is he gives the option to people, should they stay Christian or not stay Christian, and then he gives reasons on both sides and says he doesn't really care where you come down, but he says that he wants us all to get to the place where we realize that everything is in evolution, the biological world, people's minds, intellect, everything, and that religion is in evolution always. And religion is always changing. And
hmm
so we have to be able to change with it. And the thing that's important in his book is a never-ending conversation where we're all in harmony and we don't judge anybody. And judging is the worst thing you can do in postmodern philosophy is actually saying, no, this is right and you're wrong. You can't do that because that's very presumptive and it's judgmental. And
hmm
how do you think your ideas are any better than any other person? So, see, one of the problems I have here is we we're we're dealing with churches And I don't know how it is at Oldham Lane. I know the churches I've ministered to and the churches around here that I've visited, but we're dealing with churches who often have a curriculum at the church, meaning they're talking about things at that particular church,
Mm.
and they're talking more about issues. And our people that are struggling with this postmodern ideology, we need to go beyond behind those issues, and we need to really talk more about our assumptions.
Yeah.
And we need to redig the entire wells with people and start with, is there a God and is there evidence for a God? And is there reason to believe that the Bible is any more than just one more ancient piece of literature, and really spend time there? And so, you know,
Yeah.
if that's true, and if this is true, then that leads us to the next step. Do we take the Bible literally? Because Brian McLaren will say that one of the things we need to do if we're going to reinvent Christianity for the modern world is we need to get rid of all the authoritarian doctrines. We need to redefine our relationship with the Bible completely,
Mm.
because it's a great piece of literature and it's inspiring, but it's certainly not demanding that we all do what it says to do. So see, that's where people are. And
Yeah.
a lot of our, like the college students you deal with, I think they're listening to what preachers are saying, but these other questions are the
Hmm.
ones that are plaguing their mind, you know. And,
Yeah. No,
and
that's just as you're talking. What I just got finished teaching, it was like 9 weeks on how we got the Bible. And I mean, it was a well-attended class and there's a lot of interest. And I think one of the reasons why is there's been a lot of attack on just the integrity of the scriptures. And,
absolutely.
we'd say this Bible verse says this, and they'll say, but how do I know that Paul actually wrote that? Maybe
Right,
Paul didn't actually say that. And
right,
how can we be confident in the integrity of the scriptures? So, yeah,
right.
you're right. Those assumptions that we take for granted. And I think that's some of that generational gap between you talk about boomers and millennials and those that are talking past one another. The assumption is of the older generation that the younger people are looking at those things through the same exact lens, and they're not because,
No, absolutely not.
yeah, that
And
foundation has
and
crumbled.
it's very frustrating because you can tell in some parents' eyes when they're talking to their young person, whoever that
Right.
is,
Right.
they're not getting through it all, and they have no clue why they're not getting through it.
Right. Yeah.
Another thing I really feel like is that in churches, a lot of churches, some people are afraid to ask questions,
Mm,
and there are certain unspoken rules about what things you question and what things you don't question. And
right.
there's not really a safe place within that congregation, especially in a public forum,
Yeah.
to ask anything you want to ask and
Hmm.
get a real detailed answer about what and why and what we base all this on. And so I think that needs to happen in our churches. There needs to be a lot of safe places for people to ask anything they want to ask about anything.
Oh man, that is so true. We did recently, it's been ongoing. I'm still kind of doing it, but just Ask the Preacher series.
Yeah,
And on Sunday nights, people when and one the only thing I said is any question, please bring it because if you have it, someone else probably does, but make attach your name to it. Send it. I won't make that public. I won't say this person asked it, but I want to know who's standing behind the question and then we can talk even further outside of this. But um, it was really good. One of the main things we drove at the whole time was if you can't ask questions, that is a church that has uh, closed itself off from true learning. And I think a lot of that's based in fear of,
it is.
if this person has this question, if we begin to open this, open the table to the question, well, are we then maybe admitting that we've been wrong in a certain area? I don't think it has to be that way at all. It's just people are at different points in their faith. And just like with a kid, like my kids during Bible time at night, they have all kinds of questions. If we shut them down, ultimately we'll lose them.
Yeah, that's right. One of the points that McLaren makes about why not to be a Christian, he says if a lot of people leave Christianity because Christianity suppresses dissent. They
Mm,
talk about heresy. They're not tolerating disagreement. And of course, there's a kernel of truth in that. There's truth in that,
mm,
but I think part of that comes from the idea that there's some things you're not allowed to openly debate and discuss in the sense that you're getting down to why you believe what you believe and how can you prove what you believe. And I'm finding
right.
that even more so than the millennials, I think you're a millennial, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, more so than the millennials, the really young people now are really, really interested in those very open, tough nut discussions, and they like that. And
Mm,
they need that.
yeah.
And they will really study with you if you'll get down to things. But
Mhm.
I think that we have a category of our brotherhood that is very, how would I say it? I think that they're cloistering themselves off from the world to the point
Mhm.
that um, they almost like live in a monastery because they do all their own. I'm not against homeschooling if people want to homeschool, but they do all their own schooling. They associate with a certain small group of people. They don't realize and don't prepare the people outside of their group for the postmodern thought that's everywhere. And so when their children or whoever does get out and do get out in the world, they have no idea how to interact with the postmodern culture. And
Mm,
so it's almost like we become so cloistered that we can't really um, effectively defend the Christian faith as it is in the Bible to the postmoderns because we've never been taught how to do that. We've never been around people asking those questions. We've never had to do that. So that's a big concern of mine in moving forward.
yeah. Well, I think that when when you're forming anybody, they have to have some exposure, at least by way of awareness, not necessarily immersion to the
Mhm.
things that are being taught and said, but ultimately parents bear that responsibility
They
of
do.
training up and raising and but giving their kids an awareness of this is what the world teaches and
Absolutely.
this is what they say and here's why we don't do that.
Yeah,
And
how many people actually give their kids this is how a lot of people think the Bible got here.
mhm,
Give them the very
yeah,
naturalistic liberal view and explain it all and
yeah,
say, now this is why we don't think that's true and run through all the arguments. See, but most of the time it's just the Bible says this and this is what we're going to do because the Bible says so, but they're not ready for that next jump. At how do we get to the first assumption that started us down this road?
Yeah, well, I'm going to move on to another question here in a second, but one final thing I'll say about that. We were at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science just a couple weeks ago, me and my family, and we walked in and we saw this little miniature hominoid, this and it's ultimately fiction. I mean, and we were
Was it
talking.
Lucy?
It was Lucy, and
Yeah. Okay.
we're talking with our kids and saying, look, this is what they're saying. And what does the Bible say? Is to bring it back to Genesis 1 through 3. But if those first couple chapters fall apart, a lot of the rest of the scripture doesn't stand either. But just helping them see the inconsistencies that are there, and they're aware. They tell us anytime they're reading in their books. It says 65 million years ago or whatever. And we just talk about the creation and
Yeah. And how do you know that? And what assumptions is that based on?
yeah.
On Lucy, and I know we're kind of going down this rabbit hole, but there was years ago a National Geographic presentation on what they actually found with Lucy.
Hmm.
and they showed the actual bones that were found, and the actual bones were in white, and the rest of Lucy that they had reconstructed was in darker material. And the
Hmm.
only white on the entire thing was a little piece on the side of the head, and I think part of a radius or an ulna or something like that. The entire rest of the being was reconstructed, and it was totally a fiction based on somebody's theory that they put together. And so that's, you know, we need to be showing people things like that to show them that
Yeah,
these people have a faith, and their assumptions are based on their faith, and
right.
they're and, uh, they're not really grounded in reality like they claim to be scientific. So
Right. And Christians a lot of times adopt the presuppositions of people who made those presuppositions based on not believing in God.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what this whole video is about right here.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Okay. So what, in what were Christians doing in the early centuries that impressed the world with Christ rather than in the reversal? And I'm thinking about, there's a quote from an Irish historian, William Lecky, and he said that, this is in his history of the European morals from Augustus to Charlemagne. And, he's not a Christian. I think he was an agnostic, but he said that it may be stated categorically that um, the active record of 3 short years of life that's given in the Gospels has done more to soften and regenerate the hearts of mankind than all of the exhortations of moralists and the disquisitions of philosophers. And he's saying Jesus made a mark and his followers made a mark. And that mark was from Christ out rather than Christians being impressed by the world. What do you see that in your understanding?
I do see that Christ has had ripple effects down through all of humanity all time, and has changed lives like nobody else has changed lives. I think the idea that Christianity swept the culture in the first few centuries is really not
Mm.
fair. The gospel was preached widely. Many people did become Christians. However, Christianity from its very inception was countercultural. It
Hmm.
did it did not it did not change the prevailing culture. It changed countless lives over its period, but from soul to soul. Remember, Peter talks about how just 8 people were saved in the ark, and many are called, but few are chosen.
Hmm.
And wide is the way, broad is the way that leads to destruction. Straight is the gate, and narrow the way that leads to life, and few there be that find it. So even though Christianity is the leaven that can leaven anybody that lets it in,
Hmm.
and has had great effects on some of the values of Western culture and other places, Christianity has always been a minority countercultural movement. And one of the things we have to realize is what we're preaching is
Hmm.
always going to be countercultural. And we're going to have to defend it and convince people. Second Corinthians 10:5, we're trying to capture every thought under the obedience of Christ.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do that unless we challenge the culture, but we're going to have to challenge the culture as Jesus did in a way that shows them love, shows them genuine Christian living, shows them that we practice what we preach,
Hmm.
shows them that we can defend what we believe, shows them that we accept them as people even if we don't agree with them. He
Yep.
ate with the publicans and sinners. So uh, I do think that Christ continues to be the most revolutionary figure in all of history and has had more influence. But a lot of people think of Christendom
Hmm.
when they think about the cultural shifts in Christianity, and it has affected culture. But
Hmm.
Christendom and Christians, real Christians, that's different things. So
Yeah. I was listening to have you listened to anything from Wes Huff?
I
The
don't think
Canadian,
so.
he's a Canadian apologist. He's got some really good stuff. He's kind of a manuscript scholar, and he does a lot on can we trust the Bible? Really good
Yeah.
stuff. But there was a viral debate that he did with a guy named Billy Carson. And Billy Carson's one of those guys with totally different assumptions. And I listened to them going back and forth. And one of the things that Billy Carson was talking about is he was trying to say that the Bible supports slavery and thinks that it's a positive good. And he quoted some things from the New Testament and stuff like that. And one of the points that Wes Huff made is that there's never been an abolitionist movement that wasn't Christian, in the sense that when Christians, who rightly understood, yes, Paul in the first century is dealing with a reality that was present. Maybe half of Romans were slaves at that time. I mean, super high percentage. And Paul's dealing with that reality, and he's saying within that framework, here's how you should act if that's the nature of things.
Hmm.
Wasn't he wasn't stating it as a positive good.
No, and Jesus said, "Do to others as you would have them do unto you." So eventually, that
Eventually,
that
right,
ethic will lead you out of slavery.
right. And so do you see that those kinds of movements as being good, as being something that should be pursued from Christians looking outward? Or what is our relationship to the structures that exist in society that may be counter to Christ?
I need you to clarify your question a little bit.
So as we look, looking at maybe something like abortion,
Yeah.
what is the Christian's perspective on that, and how does he go about effecting change out of a love for neighbor?
Yeah, I think that what we do is we tell the people around us why we believe what we believe about it. And we talk about the preciousness of life, and we talk about, how it's all from God and how God has told us not to kill, and we bring scientific evidence to bear, and we do our best to share how we feel about it, and we put that out there so that they can think about it.
Hmm.
And we leave those discussions with the people that we're talking to feeling like we still love them, whether they agree with us or not, but
Hmm.
we try to do the best we can, like First Peter 3:15, give a reasonable defense of the
Hmm.
faith that is within you, yet do
Right.
it with gentleness and respect. See?
Hmm.
And I think that approach lets them know that we are open and accepting to them as people, but we firmly believe these things, and this is why. And
Right.
we will love them whether they agree with us or not. That doesn't mean we'll agree with what they do, but it
Right.
means that we will love them whether they agree with us or not.
Right. So it is important to be vocal about what is true and good,
Yeah,
even when it is contrary to what people are saying.
absolutely. But the way you're vocal and the way you
Hmm.
treat people and the kindness with which you embrace those people and make them feel not threatened when you're having the discussions. And I think we always go back to our basic assumptions in life and where we get those assumptions. And the longer we can continue those discussions, the better off we'll be. And I think a lot of times, as we started out this video,
Hmm.
two people begin to discuss an issue like that, and we get hung up on the issue. We
Hmm.
can tell them what we believe, but what we haven't done is be patient enough with each other to see what each other's assumptions are,
Right.
and to carefully over time question those assumptions and lead them from point one up to where we can really have a common discussion about that issue in relationship with the Bible.
Right. When I'm dealing with my kids, it it I'm I'm mindful of the fact that you can't kick against nature. I mean, what
Hmm.
God has created is always going to be what God created, and we can try to ignore it and that kind of stuff. But, you know, my children, one of them may take his brother's toy and think it's rightfully his, and he's justified in it. But the moment his brother does it to him, he recognizes this is wrong.
Hmm.
He knows it's wrong. He just doesn't know it's wrong when he's the one doing it. And so when you're dealing with these people, they may think some of these things are okay to do, but the moment you open up that assumption, would you like it done to yourself? Just as Jesus said, you know, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. It helps them realize, oh, there's a double standard going on here.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you think that, we're talking a lot about postmodernism and that relativity of thought, that there's
Hmm.
no absolute truth. Do you think that we're beginning to move away from that in some respects? And the reason why I ask is when I was, coming up, especially like in the early 2000s, I often saw a lot of coexist bumper stickers.
Hmm.
And, each letter on the coexist represents a different world religion. And, it's basically saying, hey, let's all just live in harmony.
Right.
Do your thing, I'll do mine. But at least over the last few years, from what I'm seeing, it seems like there is a firming up within the broader culture of certain ideas that they think are true and they wish to impose them. Do you think there's a movement beyond postmodern thought, or
I
is it just
don't.
taking a different
In
shape?
fact, I think in the United States, not in just little pockets, but especially in the larger cities and other places, that postmodernism is the up and coming and going thing, and that we're going to face the assumptions of postmodernism more and more and more and more. I think you find some religious groups asserting the truth that they believe in more strongly,
Mm-hmm.
and you find more pockets of that, and you find conflict over that. But and I think in churches of Christ, if I can be so bold, I think we have some that assert things very strongly, but they're not addressing the fundamental issues of postmodernism, that are the very assumptions, not very effectively. And on the
Mm-hmm.
other end, we have people that are embracing postmodernism and redefining their Christianity. It's almost what McLaren calls deconstruction of the Christian faith and constructing it again, reconstruction where it's more friendly to the
Mm-hmm.
everybody lives in harmony view. And
Right.
and it's interesting to me that some denominations, especially conservative denominations, are becoming more straightforward about biblical teachings, while in big sections of churches of Christ, we have people that are getting further and further away from the things that they're coming back to. So it's pretty hard to put your finger on it, but I think postmodernism's here to stay for a while.
Do you
And we
think
have to
that,
address it.
yeah, well, absolutely. Um, do you think that those who hold the postmodern view are consistent with their own assumptions?
No,
And the
I
reason I'm
think
asking, well, go ahead.
no, I think that they try to be. And the philosophy as they set it forth, because they are very accepting and everything. But the way that if they say there's no absolute truth, that in itself is an absolute.
Right.
And so they're guilty of doing things like that all the way through, and they assume the theory of evolution as a no-brainer, that it's it's the way it is, and they assume that nobody has the truth. So all those are assumptions that can be gotten behind, and they claim to be scientific, but they're really not in every aspect. But that
Right.
has to be demonstrated to people point by point, and so. And we
Hmm.
don't we don't often take the time to do that. We're ready to talk about, let's talk about the role of women. Well, that's
Right.
fine, and then we should and we need to, but you're blowing in the wind if you don't establish the underpinning of that first.
Right. Yeah, it seems that some of it, just in my view, it seems that some of it is almost reactionary. Those in the West that a lot of their view is anti-Christian because it's post-Christian. We're coming out of a Christian context and they've already kind of written off Christianity.
Hmm.
But then you see these weird things where, you talk about this inconsistency where they'll peg Christians as being misogynistic and against women, and then they're kind of like, hey, we need to be really accepting of the Islamic faith, which, if any religion is going to be, you know,
Right.
objectively contradictory to women, it's not Christianity.
Well, if
And
that's right, but of course, postmodernism realizes that their view was everybody's contradictory, and so I'm just as contradictory as they are in their view, and so that's the way they say that we all just have to keep learning from one another. So, uh,
yeah.
I think that the bottom line of this for me is that we as preachers and teachers in the church need to really take a look at what we're preaching and make sure that we're addressing the basic assumptions on which everything is built and show that if you accept A, which we're going to give the real hard evidence to, then
Yeah.
B follows. And if you accept B and we're going to really dig into that and give the evidence for that, then
Right.
C follows, you know.
Yeah.
So why
How do
should we? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, how do you advise? Because a lot of this that we're talking about has to do with, as you've been saying, worldview,
Yep.
the way that we see the world. How do we develop a truly Christian worldview in our children, in our churches, and that would inform the way that we're living?
I think our churches need to be heavy with apologetics about the reason for the existence of God, the failings of evolution, and why there's evidence for microevolution but not macroevolution, and how that we need to really get into what you've been getting into is how did the Bible get here? What does the Bible actually claim? Is there any reason to believe in those things? Are there internal evidences that the Bible is what it says it is? How did the Bible, the canon, come about? How can we know it's been copied right? All of those things that you've been teaching about. Why do we think the teachings of the apostles are authoritative? What do we base that on? Why should
Hmm.
we believe everything that Jesus said? We need to redig the wells from the beginning.
Yeah. There's almost a lag sometimes as some of these things are going out of vogue. Sometimes the church is, kind of behind the times in this respect, where, and what I mean is a lot of Christians have kind of adopted theistic evolution from a macro sort. And
Absolutely.
I was at a conference in Dallas recently. Stephen Meyer was there, and um Ben Carson, and a number of people that are in the scientific world, and they were presenting intelligent design. And
Hmm.
I was able to ask a question in this forum, and they answered it. And one of the things I was asking is, are you beginning to see more people, even within the scientific community, um, rejecting Darwinism? And he said, absolutely. I mean,
That's encouraging.
yeah, it is. They're not necessarily becoming Christians.
Yeah.
Many of them are not, but there's enough holes within it that they're starting to look for a new theory.
Yeah.
And I wonder, do Christians know that? Because some
Well, they
Christians are,
need to.
yeah.
I listen to a lot of podcasts about what you're talking about right there. And there's a guy named John Lennox. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of
Oh,
his stuff.
love him.
But
Yeah.
John Lennox is really good in a lot of these things, and people like him would be a good diet for some of our young people to listen to. And that's just one little resource that could go into a curriculum of reestablishing the basics and the things that the basic assumptions are based on. I gotta cut this off here in a minute, but a really good book. It's old book. People don't
Hmm.
like old books, but I went to ACU in the late 70s and I had J.D. Thomas for one of my professors.
Okay.
And he anticipated a lot of this in his book called Facts and Faith, Volume 1, Facts and Faith by Dr. J.D. Thomas.
Okay.
If you read that and get your kids educated on what's in that book, that'll help a lot towards pulling them away from postmodern postmodern philosophy.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to check that out. Thank you for the suggestion.
And I want to say before we close, I would not recommend anybody whose faith is not really grounded reading that book by Brian McLaren, Do I Stay Christian? But I would recommend for you that you read it.
Yes,
It
sir.
won't be enjoyable to you, but it will certainly get your attention and it will open your eyes and might point you in some good directions for
Yeah, how to
things you
combat it.
need to talk about. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for that suggestion. I'm going to check it out.
Well,
Sounds
brother, I appreciate your time. And if you think of some things that you'd like to follow up with, maybe we'll do a part two, discuss some things
yeah.
further.
Oh yeah, I got more questions. We just didn't get to them. So,
That's okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you, and I try to keep the videos to a certain
yes,
length
sir.
of time
No, I
because
think that's yeah,
so I
that's
appreciate
great.
your time and appreciate you and what you do.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it very much.
All right, brother. See you.
Yep.